Hello Year 9 Chemists and welcome to the guidance video for week 8. This week we're going to learn a large body of facts about cations, which are positive ions, and anions, which are negatively charged ions. The great thing about chemistry is that you're able to do some chemical reactions. These ones are solution chemistry, but there are a few that produce gases. And by doing these chemical reactions, observing tests, adding chemicals that we know, and coming up with results or producing results that we know and recognize, we are then able to identify ions, identify particles, identify chemicals that are present in unknown substances. So this lesson will be all about getting the knowledge into our heads of the different chemical tests that the exam board require you to be able to recall. Testing for charged particles, just testing for positively charged ions, which are cations, and negatively charged ions, which are anions. Now, I've split this up into 2 lessons, and this is going to be a full hour. This is not something that you can do in the last minute. It's not one of those. This is going to be a full bulk of clips, because this is going to be a virtual lab. You're virtually going to be in a lab. You're going to be doing these tests using the clips that I have recommended to you, and you're going to be able to identify the presence of these ions. So in lesson one will be starting off quite gently. It will be talking about 4 positively charged ions: lithium, sodium, potassium, and copper 2. So that's the copper 2, as in the copper 2 plus ion. Then lesson 1 goes on to talking about the carbonate tests, chloride, bromide, and iodide tests, the nitrate tests, the sulfate tests, and the sulfite tests. In older texts for Cambridge IGCSE, the sulfite test wasn't quite there, but now it is. Lesson 2 talks about the tests that you can do for these cations, these positively charged ions that are in aqueous solutions that have water as a solvent. So it's aluminium 3 plus ion, the ammonium ion, which is NH4 plus, calcium, which is Ca2 plus, chromium Cr3 plus, so it's chromium 3 ion, the copper 2 Cu2 plus, so we already met that with the flame test, iron 2, so that's Fe2 plus, iron 3, Fe3 plus, and zinc, which is Zn2 plus. Now, with some of these tests, the explanations about things dissolving, for example, with excess alkali, produce things called complex ions. And a soluble complex ion is a soluble ion, something that will dissolve. It's a charged particle with several negative ions or several molecules that are around your original positive metal ion. Now, Cambridge have filtered out the knowledge of complex ions. You do not need to know about the formulae of complex ions, which is the reason why I really want you to do this lesson without going on Google. If you go on Google, you're going to find the formulas of these complex ions, and they're going to look very, very scary, and you're going to be scared unnecessarily. So what I would suggest is stick to the track, stick to the recommendations that I'm giving you, and when you do the quiz, it is Ramadan. I realise it's going to be quite difficult for you, particularly with all of this knowledge, all of this new knowledge, to be able to recall everything correctly for the quiz. So for this quiz, for these 2 lessons, there's only 1 quiz. I am happy for you to be able to do this open book. If you want to do it open book, use the sections in your book section 19.4 and section 19.5. Now, it doesn't make it any easier because there are a lot of facts for you to be able to get through. It's not cheating or anything like that. It's just like literally there are a huge number of new bits of information that you need to get your head around. And by taking off the pressure for the quiz, I want you to focus on the actual information that you need to learn. Of course, if you feel like taking on a little extra challenge, you don't have to use the information, the tables that are in section 19.4 of your book and 19.5. You can have a go yourself and then double check it in order to produce the answers. So what I'd like you to do in lesson 1 is I'd like you to click on these YouTube clips. They have been chosen. They're actually from one longer, larger YouTube clip. But what I've done is I have clipped each link so that it jumps straight into the video that the part of the video clip that is important for answering that question. As soon as you've answered that question, then stop the video, and then you've got a little table here for this particular task. I've just come up with something like that. It's an adaptation of what's actually in the video. Don't try and scan the video for the table and try and find a shortcut. It's not going to stick into your long-term memory. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just go through the steps, go through this video, get to a point where you can identify positive ions, come up with the flame color, and then move on to the next clip. Do the same for lithium ions, then copper 2 ions and sodium 2 ions. And then click on this clip over here where you will find all 4 as a summary. So this was actually a nice choice of video. All 4 of them are in there, so you can check your answer with that. Now again, just a quick reminder, all of this is in the core section of your specification. So a C grade student working at C grade requires you to be able to recall all of these. So again, don't take any shortcuts because, for example, you may come up with a color for potassium, lithium, calcium, copper, sodium straight away, but you may not necessarily then be able to remember it at a later stage. The extension is is this one over here where I've asked you to identify calcium ions. That's in the original clip. But calcium ions is not part of the Cambridge IGCSE. You won't need to come up with that. It's just there for an extension, and it's a nice pretty colour as well. Then when you move on to the next activity, task 2. I've got a friend of mine in the UK, Fran Scott. She has produced these videos on behalf of the Royal Society of Chemistry. And what you need to do is, I would suggest getting another piece of scrap paper. So for the first activity, get scrap paper. Don't need to write notes into your workbook for this. Everything is in your textbook. So scrap paper is fine. You can use scrap paper for this table over here as well, and just work your way through these videos. They're very straightforward, they're very short. It's only about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes for each one. I've chosen these clips so that you don't have to go on the internet. Don't Google it, it's not going to stick in your mind, trust me. So you've got a little bit of information here, a nice little table just made in advance, and the testing for sulfite ions is something that's quite unique for Cambridge IGCSE, so I've just found a little tiny clip for that just to demonstrate it. So go through those, and then the next activity that you have to do, which is task 3, so by that stage you should be at the half-an-hour stage, and then go through each and every single one of these tests. That talks to you about all of the information that you need to learn from the second page of section 19.4. There's a full page in your textbook that has a complete table on it. What you need to do is you need to be able to get that information, as much information from there, into your head. Now, to be kind to you, because it is Ramadan, in the quiz I will not be checking your ionic equations. I'm not going to be testing you on the ionic equations. I think it's more of a, it's just as much of a challenge to actually remember what all of the observations are. But you should be returning to this topic as a revision topic in your year 11. So right towards the end of year 11, you'll get another chance to go back to this topic and revise this topic before your actual papers. And when you go through that a second time, that is when I would expect you to be able to then come up with ionic equations for the reactions. By then, you will already have a very good grasp of ions. You would have been through electrolysis, you would have been through oxidation states, so ionic equations will and should come to you more readily. You would have already been through all of the information from year 9. This is what you're doing right now. So you'll be able to concentrate on the ionic equations for the reactions to really boost your grade as much as you can to the C level. So gather the information, as much information as you can, watching the quiz. Complete any notes on scrap paper. You will need them for the final quiz. What I would suggest is, that you come up with your own table. And in that table, you come up with the following columns: cation, test, and the observation if the cations are present. And then after that, what you can do is you can compare your notes with the notes in section 9.4 in the book, and you can purple pen them if you so wish. Okay? Right. So then once you've done that, the extension activity, by the way, if you finish that very, very quickly, so once you've done that, learn all of the ionic equations for each of the reactions. So I'm expecting my A's and A stars to memorize all of the information that I've already been through and then get onto these ionic equations, okay? So this is actually taken from a slightly older electronic version of your textbook. So you can see here that the older version actually had the formulae of the complex ions, and now that's actually been taken out of the IGCSE. So anywhere where you see the red comment, formula of complex ions, beyond the IGCSE exam, the actual formula is not required. You won't be needing to come up with that, but the observation is, and these ionic equations are required. Okay, when you do that quick quiz, if you get a correct answer, I have programmed it so that it gives you the ionic equation. And so if you do understand it and you come up with the correct observation, I therefore assume that you can recall that particular test. You are then ready to be given the ionic equation for that reaction that you've just answered in your quick quiz. If you answer a question in your quick quiz incorrectly, I don't think you're ready for the ionic equation. And so what you would need to do is you would need to go back to remembering the features of that test. The test itself, what chemicals you need to add, and what observation you would get if you actually have that cation or anion present. Okay, so the quiz itself is quite differentiated this week. If you do remember a lot of the observations, it will stretch and challenge you, and if you don't, it will emphasize that you should just concentrate first of all on the observations. So as an extension, again, these formulas, these complex ions, they are beyond the IGCSE exams, but the observations themselves are. The observations are in your IGCSE. So once you've done that, have a go at the quiz. So just to give you an idea of what is actually on the quiz, you open up the quiz and it will say, before you proceed, you must complete all parts of the guidance slides. This includes watching all clips recommended. Please sign that, and then you just make a start on the quiz. And the quiz will start off with the flame tests for cations, and what you'll need to do is you'll just need to match the colours to the correct cations. So you can do that. So that will be the first part. And then After that, it will be testing for ions in the virtual lab, negatively charged ions, and then it will go into positively charged